I'm Bret Tax. I've traveled 5 continents in over 50 countries. And I'm telling you, it's important to always be prepared. This is all the things that you must bring with you on every trip. You need to have a hammer. You need to have a spare hat. Don't forget your tools. Duct tape fixes everything, and don't forget to have a spare roll. If you need to change fork seals and oil's important. Don't forget if there's a flat. It's a lot of work to be working on the bike. Have water with you, spare ram mount. Let's see, we have this, we have, just in case I break the axle loose. Okay, that's a lot of stuff. I'm just kidding. Welcome to my day job. This is classroom for Puget Sound Safety. By day, I'm an instructor. By night, I'm a YouTube sensation. Aw, I remember that guy. Now we're coming up on 100,000 subscribers. We're going to celebrate 100,000 subscribers here in Western Washington. You're all invited. Pay attention to social media. We'll post where and when. These are all of the tools, spares, and repairs that I carry with me. And all of these fit in this bag. In our first tools video, I showed you how to build a toolkit that was streamlined and specific just to your motorcycle. In this video, I'm going to talk about the tools I carry internationally. This is my toolkit and my emergency supplies that I carry through Africa and South America. The biggest difference between this are the tools are a little larger, a little easier to work with, but more importantly, it's all the supplies I carry in case something goes wrong. And that's what I want to share with you. One of the first things that I have in here, easy to grab, are just packing straps. These are the packing straps they use when motorcycles come to the manufacturers. Some will give them away for free, some they'll charge a few dollars, but the reason I carry these straps, I don't use them much for packing, but if you rip a pannier off the bike or you damage a pannier frame, these work very, very well for re-securing those onto the bike. It's amazing when straps come in handy. These are really, really strong. Zip ties are something most of us as riders end up carrying, and they're wonderful for stitching back together plastic, almost Frankenstein. You can drill a hole and use multiples of them. But what I like are the stainless steel zip ties. These become very important. They're a lot more durable. And where I've used these often is when I rip off a skid plate or somebody else rips off a skid plate. Many of the bikes have a fracture bolt on the bottom that's designed to fail and rip off. If you don't have replacements, it's bouncing around. And if you've already ripped off your skid plate, it means you need it. So having something like a stainless steel zip tie and a multitudes of them can be very useful for making those types of repairs. JB Quick Weld, a cold weld epoxy, is an absolute must. I've used this multiple times on other bikes, and I've used it on my own bike. When you've tipped over, cracked a side cover, or in one case, somebody punched the bottom of their engine case through their skid plate. This allows you to clean all the paint off, put a seal on it, and it will last, well, it'll last a full continent or more. Loctite is an important thing to carry. It's basically a glue for bolts and nuts. With all the vibration, especially riding off-road, it's not uncommon to have bolts back off, or if you have to repair or replace something, you tighten it back up, it's more likely to back off. I always carry blue thread lock with me. The red is intended to be permanent, so it can be very difficult to break free later. The blue, it works, and you can break it free with just a wrench or with a ratchet. Stainless steel safety wire, most commonly used by road racers or by off-road riders. It works very well for us if you end up with a grip that moves or slips. What they do is they'll wrap this around, tighten up the safety wire, it'll keep the grip in place. But also because it's made of metal, it can be very useful in making other types of repairs. Again, broken body work, bent, or even with panniers where you might get a tear, you can put it back together with metal. Electrical tape and duct tape. You can fix almost anything with duct tape. But to carry something this size and this much weight, everything adds up and eventually doesn't make a lot of sense. So what I do instead is I'll wrap the tape around one of the tools. I'll make a tool handle for one of my wrenches. The duct tape leaves a really thick residue behind. So I'll take painter's tape, which leaves almost no residue. I'll put it around the wrench, and then I'll wrap the duct tape around the wrench. So it's always good. It's space that is not wasted, and it doesn't add a lot of weight to my kit. I'm trying to address those issues that will leave me stranded where I need to get out of the woods or back into a civilized area where I can get a permanent fix. So these are all temporary fix items, and flat tires, they're always a possibility. My BMW is tubeless, so I do carry a small kit that allows me just to plug the tires. But because I like riding off-road, often what gets me a flat isn't going to be a nail or something sharp and easy. It's going to be a big sharp rock or something that might actually tear or cut the tire. So I always carry a tube patch repair kit as well. That'll have the larger patches, so if I get a tear inside, I can take the tire off and patch it that way. If you have a tube tire, you're going to be required to carry one of these anyways. I make sure I always carry more than one core remover, and I carry spare cores for inside the tube. Often these can be damaged, lost, or just stop working, so always having a spare is a good idea. But even then, it doesn't always solve the problem. One of the issues you run into off trail is you have a very small air pump, something that doesn't put out a lot of pressure. And if you have a tubeless tire, no matter how well you fix it, you may not be able to get that tire to actually seat, or the damage is on the sidewall and it's something you can't repair. The only way to solve that issue is to install an inner tube. For me, I only need to carry one tube. A 19-inch tube will work well enough to inflate my 17-inch rear wheel as well as the 19 on the front. If it's a 21/17, I end up carrying two. With the tube inside the tire, even with the slow inflation rate of a small pump, it'll continue to expand until eventually that tire pushes all the way back up onto the bead. And again, if it's a sidewall tear, this is the only fix you have. The challenge is, how do you carry this tube without damaging it? The blue painter's tape protects the tube from the duct tape. The duct tape protects the tube from everything else. On top of that, I get the bonus of extra duct tape if I need it to fix some other problem. The tape is nice to compress the tube, but another alternative is simply just wrap your tube in plastic and then tape the plastic. Yeah, it does look a little suspicious at the border crossing. Bury it deep. Along with your repair items, make sure, of course, you have the tools to break the bead and pull the tire off the rim, even if you have a tubeless tire. And if I end up changing tires on the road, I always carry a strip of weights with me so I can do a static balance on that tire before I put it back on the bike. Also, if you throw a weight, it can be a pretty rough ride. I carry a heavy-duty dual-lock Velcro that's plastic on both sides. This is really good for mounting things onto the motorcycle, minor repairs. I've used this when I've broken my helmet mount for my comm system and reattached it using this. If I need to make an electrical repair, this weighs almost nothing. This is shrink wrap. It allows me to make the repair. I put the shrink wrap over the top of the repair and I heat it up with a lighter or a torch. It's way more professional than electrical tape. I started carrying a tape measure with me just so I could set the sag on my motorcycle and tune my suspension. But it's very useful when something goes wrong. I've also used it to measure bolts, so when I make phone calls looking for parts, or if I have to manufacture some sort of part, I can take exact measurements. Bike-specific things I carry are things such as an O-ring, crush washers, or even a belt for my alternator. If that fails, I'm kind of out of business. And that's something to consider when you're traveling. If you have a bike that's chain drive, and what I did through South America on my 800GS was I carried a section of extra chain, just a little piece. So when I replace my chain, I keep the spare, and then I buy two master links for either end. And the reason I do that is I've had these pins fail, or you can pick up a rock that will damage the chain and you're not able to continue on. This allows you to cut that section of the chain out and splice in a new piece. If you're going to carry the extra chain, you'll also need a chain breaker and or possibly a chain press to Depends what kind of master link you have. I was down in Uruguay and I had lost my chain breaker. I had to borrow from a local guy, which was really interesting because he spoke a language I didn't speak, which was Portuguese. And I had to take a bench grinder and actually grind off the outer link so I could splice in the new chain. So definitely important to have the right tools with you. And depending how hard you travel and where you're going, you may end up carrying fork seals with you, wheel bearings, head bearings, or even an oil filter. For me, I've been able to find automotive filters that cross over to my motorcycle for both the 1200GS and the 800GS. And in fact, one of the benefits is it fits my Toyota Tacoma the same. So I get to use them and I can find those filters anywhere in the world. But if you have a filter very specific to your motorcycle, it may be something you want to carry with you. You may also need to bring extra items with you, such as brake pads, quality chain, or sprockets, things that fit your bike very specifically that could be impossible or near impossible to find in remote parts of the world. There's other tools you might consider if you're traveling internationally. This one I bought while I was in Mexico because we dented a rim. One of the people I was riding with ended up using it 3 times to repair the same rim. Turns out I tried to get rid of this almost the entire trip. It kept being given back to me and I used it over and over and over again. I ended up replacing wheel bearings and head bearings on 2 different bikes on that trip. I recommend carrying a punch. Finding one of these in Colombia or Botswana or some of these countries can be extremely difficult. And when I did find one, I paid an exorbitant amount of money to borrow it. So I do recommend carrying a punch. The bearings I could find, the tool I couldn't. A small set of locking pliers can be very useful if you damage or break off a shift lever or potentially a clutch lever or a brake lever. I don't carry spare brake levers or clutch levers with me because I have the proper protection on the motorcycles and I usually replace them with shorter levers that are less likely to be damaged. But if you do break one, a set of small locking pliers can be a lifesaver. WD-40 is kind of universal for me. It's good for breaking bolts loose. It's good for helping break the bead off of tires if it's very dry. It's also very good for helping seat a bead on a tire. By the way, it's not going to hurt the rubber. I do carry WD-40. It's good for cleaning the chains. It's good for doing a quick lubrication. It's good, well, you get the idea. It's good for almost everything, and I think I can use it to brush my teeth. I also carry a motorcycle tow strap. It's got a high tensile strength. It's the proper length. And it's going to be much better than a piece of rope or twine you find on the side of the road. If you use a tow strap, one side has a closed loop and one side has an open loop. The closed loop gets fed through and is put on the tow vehicle. If you're the motorcycle being towed, you take the non-loop side and you strap it once around on the center of the handlebar and you place a hand over the top of it. This way, if something goes wrong, when you let go, the strap can be pulled free. My current motorcycle uses a CAN bus system, so I don't have any fuses here. But if your bike has fuses, throw a few in the bag. They're light, they don't take any space. And if you have no secondary lighting and only one headlight, you may want to consider carrying a spare bulb as well. And all that's left are the tools I showed you in the first video. Our instinct is to try to prepare for every single contingency on the trail or on the road. And it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to find other things. What we're trying to do is prepare ourselves for those things that will leave us in harm's way or completely stranded. Some of my absolute best memories traveling came about because of something I couldn't fix on my own. In Congo, my subframe completely broke off the back of the bike, and the locals that came by, they brought bolts, and none of us spoke the same language, and they helped me out. In Mexico, we bent a frame. I ended up sleeping on the porch of a local policeman, meeting his family, meeting all of his family. Local club came by, he called all his friends, and all these motorcycles came to see the travelers. These memories are some of my most cherished memories. So having a little bit of vulnerability, allowing yourself to ask for help, allowing yourself to get help can be, well, it can be one of the best experiences you have.